Thank you very much indeed, Deputy. Next speaker is Deputy McGuinness, Deputy of 20 minutes.
May I firstly join with Deputy Murphy in his comments about how we set out the budget and the budget strategy. And we debate the issues after the event. So we're debating the social welfare after the announcements have been made in the budget, and likewise with all of the other measures. And for years in this House, yes, it's true, Deputy Murphy, every government and every opposition calls for a change and reform, but we never seem to get it. And there is a need for that change and reform, and you were mandated to bring it about, and you didn't. And that's the pity about this, because if that were the case, you would have a feed into your budgetary process from deputies in this House that deal with stuff in their constituency offices every week that show up the faults and failings of a system. And if you can bring that into a debate that is meaningful and that can bring about real policy change, that would be exceptionally good, not only for the department, but for the people who find themselves having to engage with social welfare. So what you get at budget time and the debate is a tinkering around with the system. €5 there and maybe a cut there and a change of regulation there, but no strategic thinking about where we're actually going with social welfare and where we're going with job activation and where we're going in terms of care for pensioners and care for those that are marginalised. Not all of us will march to the same frantic drumbeat, and there will always be those that will have to be looked after in society. And that's a fact. And if we acknowledge that fact, well then we should do it efficiently and we should do it well. And I question the 4 people that sit down and run the cabinet and run the country. I look at their qualifications, the last time they created a job, the last time they were on the front line of looking into the abyss and having nothing. It's a long time ago. Enda Kenny is here without personalising it, but he's here for a long number of years, as is the Taoiseach, as is Minister Howland, as is the Minister for Finance. And I'm not saying that they don't hear things at their constituency clinics that influence them one way or the other. But it isn't a good way to do business. It just isn't. You have people making decisions who, quite frankly, are not able to be influenced by debate in this House. And it's meaningless if that can't be the case. Now, if you look down, and I know it's the job of government TDs to pick out the best and to deliver the message for the various parties. We did it when we were on that side of the House as well. But let's look at it. In terms of what I see in my clinics is the huge delay in the processing of applications. So you get carers allowance, for example. It could be 6 or 9 months before someone gets a carers allowance through. And if it's refused and it goes to review or appeal or oral hearing, it actually will take much longer. And I've seen cases in the system that have been there for in excess of 12 months. And at times, the ones that are really entitled to it are actually refused for some unknown reason or other, because they've made a good case, they've presented their medical stuff, and they are looking after someone. And yet, we put them through the ringer in relation to qualifying for carers allowance. Too much so, I think. The same applies if you look at the appeal system itself. It just goes on forever. And you're dealing with someone at the end of that line who has no money, who is probably having supplementary welfare allowance or on supplementary welfare allowance, and they're probably entitled to what they're getting. So I would like to see an audit of all of the applications and how they're processed, how long it takes, and how quickly then we can turn those around into an efficient and positive return for the client who has been forced by circumstances to go to social welfare. I think, Minister, if you set your mind to that and you achieved it, you would be doing so much for those that are marginalised and have nothing. And at the end of it, if the answer was no, they're not entitled to the benefit they have applied for, then at least they know. But to leave people in limbo for 12 months or 18 months and to have them go back into the system again and again, it's just unforgivable. And I'm not saying that it's your fault. It's our fault here in this House that we don't recognise it, and then, if necessary, force the people on your right to bring about the appropriate changes and policies that will make the system more efficient. And the other thing about efficiency is, and we see it at the Public Accounts Committee meetings, every year millions of euro are lost to the Exchequer because of, you put it down as fraud, or you put it down as errors in the system. Well, if a business had fraud and errors that was losing $500 million through that process every single year, it'd be bust, gone. And social welfare, like many other departments, don't learn from the mistakes. You don't learn that, look, this is how it happened, and we should apply ourselves and ensure that it doesn't happen again. How many more people within social welfare will be satisfied with an increased benefit or benefit from a saving in terms of the losses? You'd have €500 million more to ease the pain and the burden on people that are on social welfare. So sometimes, Minister, it's not the question of getting the increase that is the challenge or the success story. It is actually taking the system and making it work more efficiently and making it work for the people who have to go to it because of their circumstances. And I would ask you to look at that. You know, all of us here have heard about Jobs Bridge and the difficulties there. I came across a number of people who were employed in a sporting area, and they were let go. And they were replaced later on by a person from Jobs Bridge. That doesn't achieve anything. It's just a waste of time. Now, it may be nice to massage the figures afterwards. All governments do it, by the way, so it's not a direct criticism of yourselves. It's been done in the past. But in the way that you would do new business, you would not allow that to happen. In the county enterprise boards, you couldn't get a grant if you were similar to the business that was near you. That would be called displacement. And yet, we're willing to tolerate displacement in the Jobs Bridge area. So it's not thought out, and it is not working to the extent that it should be working to bring the success to that scheme that was planned for in the first place. And I think it is worthwhile looking at that. We had the issue about domiciliary care allowance, and we had women, particularly, that came to this House and raised that issue of domiciliary care allowance. And while some effort has been made to streamline it and to make it more effective, and I acknowledge that, there's so much more simple things, so many more simple things that could be done that would deal with that issue and would bring about an understanding from the applicant as to what was required in an application. And the simple comparison that they made when they came here, the domiciliary care mothers and those that were concerned about it, was if only social welfare would take the application form that is used in the UK and use it here, it would simplify it and it would allow them to focus on what the department is really examining. That's what they asked for. That's what they suggested. And I have to say to you, Minister, and your officials, that they went away from here seriously disappointed that their engagement that they were allowed to have with the Minister and the system didn't yield for them the simple changes that they saw as being necessary to make life easier for them and others in the context of the application. And again, you're back to systems. You're back to an application. That's it. It's similar to when rental scheme was being operated by social welfare. Nobody stopped when the figures began to go to an almighty high and say, hang on a second, this scheme is not fulfilling the housing needs where it should be. And no one thought of diverting it to, building local authority houses, giving people a secure home. Everything just went on in the same vein, and nothing really has changed that much. And I know that you now have the HAP scheme. Same nonsense, a different description. Same thing. When are we going to get around to having the reform that gives people local authority houses, gives them security, gives them a sense of a home and a sense of place, and also a sense that the government is actually caring for them? Because the main messages that come out of a lot of this stuff is the government actually doesn't care. Last government, the one before, you can go back every one of them, because they don't see the reform that is impacting, that is necessary, that would impact positively on their lives. And I think we owe it to people that elect us to stand by the mandate that you were given. And that mandate is reform. It's reform, reform, reform. And greater efficiencies. We talked about, prior to the budget, about those that were self-employed. Came through the good times, they paid their taxes, they were employed, they were central to the economy, and now they don't get anything from the economy, nothing. They're forced to leave these shores and to go elsewhere to find employment. So we're losing a whole generation of enthusiastic entrepreneurs, a lot of them, some of them employed by others, but in the same vein as an entrepreneur. They're gone. A whole generation of knowledge and experience gone from this shore, simply because the system wouldn't look after them. And they were not lifers. They wanted to be on the system while they got onto their feet, and then they will be back creating employment. And we're looking to the SME sector to create the same level of jobs that they had previously, almost 1 million, give or take. And now those people have left. They're gone. I think the greatest contrick, really, in the budget and in what has happened since is the fact that you give the small increases, and they have been small increases, and small and all as they were, they're welcome. But to take it back on the water is just a joke, to be honest about it. We all know that Irish Water, in its present format, has to generate an income from water charges that will pay the bloated staff levels that they have, that will pay the consultants, that will pay for all of the extras and top-ups that are going on in that organisation. And you know that too, Deputy. It is going on, and you were right to highlight it. So all of that is going on, and they have to generate the money to cover that. You can't, on one side, create a super quango that's going to feed itself off the unfortunates that don't have anything, and then say, because they have to have that income in Irish Water, and then say you're going to take away a whole raft of people who will not have to pay. How are you going to balance that book? How are you going to say, well, there's your water, we're giving you all the credits and everything else, and by the way, we're taking it from Irish Water. Somebody has to pay Irish Water. I would suggest that you abolish Irish Water. Abolish it. Do not charge for water. And go back to the open taxation system that we have and see how that can be restructured. And what's happening here, Minister, is, and you know this, Europe is telling us you have to raise your cash off the books. You have to raise your loans off the books. And in order to do that, you have to create some entity. We call it a quango. So you're creating this quango. Well, what's wrong with the county councils raising the money? What's wrong with the county councils dealing with the systems of leaks and everything else that are there? They're the same staff. You ring up about a burst pipe to Irish Water, and it's your local friendly county council that will come out to fix it. But you're paying for that level or that layer of bureaucracy, and it actually is not needed at all. It just isn't needed. And nobody has quantified the level of leaks or the level of pipes that have to be replaced. And what has this to do with the social welfare bill? They're paying it. You may appease your Labour supporters, and that's what Labour should be all about. And I respect the input of the Labour Party into this government. But you have to be stronger. You have to represent the people. And you have to tell these fat cats that you described when you were over here to get off the bus, because they are not, in my opinion, doing the job they were intended to do. It could be done efficiently and cheaper elsewhere. And that's a fact. The other message in the budget is this. When you think of the increases that people got, when you look at the taxes that they then have to pay, water tax and property tax and all the rest of it, how are they living? I've met people, older people, that are doing without food on the table just to make ends meet, because they're a generation of men and women that actually like to pay their bills. And some of them will declare to you, and you'll hear it in your clinics, I'm sure you've heard it already, I wouldn't like to die owing money. That's what they say to you. And we're creating a situation where, with Fair Deal and everything else, they will die owing money. And have we no humanity or compassion in the system at all? Are we simply striding towards the European model where everyone is a number and where interventions by public representatives are considered a nuisance? And I would say the sooner public representatives take charge of the policy and force it into place, representing the people that elected us, then we will be able to garner more respect, and we will be able to respond to the needs of society. The small things, alarms for the elderly, telephone allowance for the elderly, things that make them safe in their own home. Have we no understanding what we've done to them? Then we force them into a system to apply for a medical card, where they're told, no, actually, we didn't get your application. And they know they've sent it in. And then they go to the whole rigmarole again of filling out the big long form, or getting all the doctor's letters, and in it goes again. Refused, review, appeal. What are we doing to the people we represent? In the name of God, people that have served this country for generations, have worked hard, harder than we ever worked, saw bad times that we've never seen. Never seen. And we call this a republic. A republic. You're a Republican. I'm a Republican. Would you treat your people like that? You shouldn't if you're a Republican. You should not. Would a Republican dip their hand into the pockets of our citizens and take money out of it? I don't think they would. We're celebrating 2016 shortly. Is that the country that they died for? Is this the country that they died for? I don't think it is. The country that they stood up for was one that had the common good at heart, that had people and their places and their homes at heart, and that were willing to support those that were marginalised and elderly. And all I want out of Parliament is to ensure that those that are elderly are looked after, that those that are marginalised are looked after, and that you fulfil the first responsibility of government, which is to care for the people, to make the people safe. And governments have failed in that responsibility. They have failed to keep their people safe. And as a result of that, you have elderly people around this country that are terrorised, not by the fright or fear that they may be broken into, but of the fact that they don't count anymore and that the government is after them. This big state of Ireland is frightening the lives out of its citizens. And it is a disgrace. And it's going on for so long now that we don't even notice. We don't even notice. And we're scaring the living daylights out of people that are on waiting lists, people that are in hospitals, elderly people that want some money, some comfort, somewhere. Just want their plight to be acknowledged. And we're running away from them. And I would say to you and the Labour Party, you always had a respected place within Irish society defending those that were marginalised and less well off. And I would say to you to put the pressure on in that government and remember the people that elected you and that you represent.
Is Deputy O'Dowd, Deputy of 10 minutes.
Michael, can I say, first of all, I listened with interest to what my colleague said there, and I want to agree with him certainly about what needs to be addressed by our society, but I would obviously, in the prescriptions which you have there, I wouldn't agree with all of them, but certainly I would agree at the